Hello and welcome to Castle of Horror, the show dedicated to horror movies and awesomeness. This week, we continue our retrospective on the Waxwork films with Waxwork II, Lost in Time. This is episode 324 from Denver, Colorado. I'm your host, Jason Henderson, publisher at Castle Bridge Media. With me from Austin is Tony Salvaggio, tech director at Rooster Teeth, lead singer and bassist of the band Deserts of Mars, and lead guitarist of the band Rise from Fire. Say hello, Tony.
Howdy.
Howdy. And also in the frozen tundra known as Austin, Mr. Drew Edwards is the writer-creator of the long-running underground comic Halloween Man, currently published by Comixology. He is a Best Writer Ringo nominee, Austin Chronicle Best of Austin Award winner, and a member of the PEN America Fellowship. Say hello, Drew.
It's the only way they'd let me appear in this one.
And finally, also in Denver, color commentary from the one and only Julia Guzman of Guzman Immigration of Denver. Say hello.
Hello, and congratulations on surviving week 1 of 2021.
Yes. Yes, indeed.
Which has actually turned out to be harder than one might have anticipated.
Yes. So, all right. Bear in mind, if you haven't seen today's movie, we're going to be discussing it from the perspective of horror fans who have seen it. So warning, spoilers ahead. Waxwork II, Lost in Time, is a 1992 American dark fantasy comedy film written and directed by Anthony Hickox. It is a sequel to the 1988 film Waxwork. The film was first released in the Philippines on March 26, 1992, and then in the United States it went straight to video. This movie came out 4 years after the original film. So let's get our opening thoughts on Waxwork II. We started with Drew last week. I think we'll start with Tony this week. We'll go Tony, Julia, Drew, and then I'll go if I have anything to add to you guys' wonderful opening thoughts. So Tony, opening thoughts on Waxwork II.
I think it's a fun movie. I don't know if it's as good as the first one, but again, when I look at it, the way that they're swinging for the fences, you kind of either you get caught up in it and you're go rah rah, this movie is just so insane and gleefully what it is that you're on board, or you probably go, well, it's kind of broad still, and I don't know if I dig these parodies or these homages a second time. So it's kind of, again, your mileage may vary on it. I personally really like that they just decided to go bonkers. I think it's a little uneven. Like they definitely load the craziness towards the end. It gets a little kind of manic, I think. But again, I don't know if that's necessarily a bad thing. I think it's I would have liked to seen some of that paced out, but what do you do when you're gonna go through basically a tour of horror through time? Some of it actually seems through time, and others are just a good excuse to visit different genres.
Yes.
So, a comedy tour of genre of horror, the horror genre, not a bad thing. It's interesting, and we'll get into it. It's interesting they replace the main woman protagonist and do it in such a way. I thought it was kind of funny that you go from an 88 kind of stereotype to a 92. Our heroine in this one looks exactly like a horror heroine from 92 would look. And that's not a knock. It's just it was amusing to me just to see, like, well, if you're gonna pick somebody, this is the look of 92. I like those kind of casting details. There's some bizarre choices, but I enjoy the film. It does have a straight to video kind of feel of its time, but lots of.
Were you surprised that it went straight? Actually, you know what?
Yeah, I mean,
I'll let everybody get their opening thoughts in. I was curious about that.
Yeah, it was good. I mean, it could have easily been released in theaters, as far as I'm like.
Yeah, I agree.
I don't think it looks bad at all. But it joins a lot of Full Moon Entertainment stuff.
Yeah.
That looked as good, or looks better than some Full Moon stuff. Not as good as maybe others. It is totally legit, but yeah, I like it.
Cool. Julia, Waxwork II. Where did you come down?
I'm just shaking my head over here. I kept saying to Jason, why did you make me watch this? Why are you doing this to me? Oh my God. No, I started out and I was like immediately going, this is so dumb. And I know Drew is going to use the word silly, and that's another way of describing it. But I just thought it was dumb at first, especially because the hand, I couldn't stop doing I couldn't suspend my disbelief. I kept going, there's no way a hand is strong enough to like fight and do all these things. It's like, there's no way. It was just really bugging me, that whole thing. Then, of course, as I've said before, there's just so much gore. And so, yes, actually, the effects are pretty impressive, but they're so gross that for me personally, that's like not my taste at all. Okay, so then there's a few things in the film where I go, oh, this is kind of cool. And then immediately something disgusting would happen. I'm like, and that happened. So now I'm done. So I couldn't ever enjoy even the things I was enjoying for very long because something really gross or really dumb would happen. So I feel like I feel like you could take parts of this film and make a film that I would enjoy. But this is not it. You know what I'm saying? So, like, for example, having Marina Sirtis be in that one,
The haunting
the
takeoff.
haunting part, that was awesome. And then, like, having her be hanging there and then suddenly point and just all of that was fantastic. And then suddenly something, I can't even remember what happened in that story where I was like, oh, and here we go. There's another thing. So, but for the most part, yeah, I wish that the concept, same for the first film and this one, the concepts are so interesting and the way that like just this, the framing device is so interesting that I wish we could make a different film that I would like with that same concept. So, maybe for our Lava Shark production.
You want a grim and gritty reboot of Waxwork II?
Yeah, right. Without all the gore and without the hand at the beginning.
Okay.
Although the hand, okay, so I will say this about the hand. I when I was watching the beginning was going, this is so stupid. Why did they even bother? And then of course it becomes super important to the plot. So then I was like, okay, I get why they bother. But I wish there was something else that you could have done, because I think the plot is basically that the character, oh, by the way, the character of Sarah Brightman, not the opera singer, but this character was played in the first movie by the girlfriend of the director. And then they had a nasty breakup. And so then she didn't want to do it again. So there's a new girl. New Sarah Brightman is poor. Old Sarah Brightman was rich, whatever. So new Sarah Brightman's stepfather is a jerk, as stepfathers always are in the movies, and almost always. So the hand from hell kills her stepfather, and she gets blamed for it because she throws the hand down the garbage disposal, and so there's no hand, I guess. I don't know. Anyway, but the point is that they have to get her off from killing her stepfather. So now they have to go back in time or whatever, back into the other dimension, so they can prove that in fact there was this reanimated hand that killed her stepfather and it wasn't her. So that is the plot, and I think something in there maybe was salvageable, but it's just so dumb.
All right.
It's a really hard time. But anyway.
Okay.
I don't want to take too much to Drew's time, but also you might be reacting to it. Also, even though, of course, it has Bruce Campbell, but it has a lot of things that people associate with, like more Sam Raimi kind of humor and pacing, and that his influences like Stooges and stuff, which again, people's mileage varies on that by a lot.
Sure.
So
I love all the cameos, by the way. I love Bruce Campbell. I love Maria Sirtis. I love that Drew Barrymore just happened to be on the set and was like, yeah, okay, I'll be a victim for 30 seconds. I don't know if you noticed her, but she was one of the Nosferatu piece. But anyway, sorry to lather on.
No, that's wonderful. Drew, what are your opening thoughts?
Two things before I get to that. One, it's a supernatural hand, so of course it can do all those things. Zombie hand. Normal hand rolls do not apply. Two, Julia, if you're gonna be mad at somebody, be mad at me. I'm the one that suggested this movie. I will take that. Like I although like you call this movie dumb, I will say fair. Even though I would call it silly, because like dumb to me is not aware. Like all the decisions in this are very deliberate, and so like, but semantics. I really like this movie, even though I acknowledge that it is very goofy movie. I don't think it's as good as the first one. I don't like the new Sarah as much. I think that she's kind of got that 90s, no offense to her, she's kind of got that 90s model actress vibe to her. But
that's precisely what this actress is. I mean,
yeah,
Monica Schnarre is a Canadian like supermodel. So yes.
Well, there you go. I think that they go a lot more into the comedy with this one, and sometimes too much. I also just don't think it has the purity of the Wax Museum setup, which is just like so like perfect. Whereas this, they try to make it into like a time travel thing, but as Tony pointed out, it doesn't quite feel like time travel. That being said, the idea of like an alternate universe that's like the horror movie universe that runs parallel to our own is kind of interesting. And you know, I almost wish that they would have spent more time developing that. So yeah, it's uneven, but it's still a lot of fun. It like you know, saying that it is a bit of a downgrade from the first one, you know, isn't, you know, that's a lot of sequels anyway. And like the first one, it does have a hell of a cast. Like it, you know, for this kind of movie, it's you know, there's a lot of, you know, like you know, everybody's already mentioned Bruce Campbell, but you got David Carradine. You know, like it's just it is an effect. If you accept it on its own terms, it is an incredibly breezy, fun, you know, hour. If you like this kind of thing, obviously, judging Julia's reaction. if you don't like gobs and gobs of prosthetic monster effects and gore, probably not for you. But if that is your kind of thing, it's 2 hours well spent.
I'm going to skip my opening thoughts because there's somewhere in between all of that, but I would end up just repeating myself. I would like to, I want to get first to the central concept here, which I find to be a really fascinating concept. It's sort of what you said, Drew, which is they could have explained it a lot better, because what it really comes down to is Patrick Macnee left them instructions on how to use a little sort of navigation device, you know, a kind of a compass sort of thing, to find walls to go into another dimension in which the cosmic battle of good and evil plays out forever in familiar fictional tropes.
That's a great concept. That's a great concept.
Great concept.
By the way, I really love Patrick Macnee showing up as the bird, the Nevermore.
Yes, the Raven.
Nevermore Raven.
Yes,
that's super fun.
You know, that's the idea. So they don't have to like say, oh, I'm traveling through time or doing whatever. And in fact, you can forgive a lot of stuff that doesn't make any sense, like the medieval bad guy that is more or less the central bad guy is Alexander Goodenough as Scarabus. He's in sort of a medieval world, and yet they're quoting Shakespeare. You don't have to worry about it because it's a fictional world. So that, you know, anachronisms don't matter. And that works a whole bunch better. And they could have, you know, you could have just had a little bit of dialogue. You almost do. And maybe I'm asking the film to, I like it when films kind of spend a little bit more time explaining stuff. And,
although, you know, I didn't think about this at the time, but the compass that they use, this predates the Golden Compass books. Or Northern Lights, I guess is originally.
I don't know anything about the Golden Compass. What are your thoughts?
Fantasy novel that does
novel. The part of it has this. I mean, this is a totally different thing, but I had to look it up to see when I was watching this one, because he has this compass that takes him to the different places. Like,
yes.
They operate differently, but they have these symbols on them. And we've been watching the series. You know, season 2 just wrapped up recently. But I was like, I wonder. I know that it's not really probably an influence, but I had to check when the dates are, because this comes, you know, the book are after this, and I just thought that was kind of funny.
I mean, the compass here is kind of neat.
If Sir Philip Pullman was like, yeah, that's a great idea, this compass from Waxwork II. I know that would be hilarious.
The idea is, if you're in one of these pocket dimensions where good versus evil is playing out, the compass will tell you where the nearest door out is. It's a great idea. That's that is great because
Well, and
who among us? Yeah,
I like, first of all, I do think the rules are more clearly worked out in the first film, which is probably one of the reasons why I like it a little better. But credit where it's due, they do make it to where they're still, even though like you're in an alternate timeline, like it's not exactly time travel. You're in
right.
an alternate timeline. They do make it to where it still has real world stakes, because they state that if you fail to defeat
Yes.
evil in these worlds, it can cause like hurricanes or earthquakes or disasters in the real world. And I think that's interesting, an interesting way of still giving the hero some, like, there's not a lot of time spent meditating on it, mind you, but it does give the heroic characters a little bit of gravity, of like, oh, we better not,
You can't just run for it. You have to sort of, you're heading into a video game in a sense, and you have to play the game through.
God's Nintendo game, they call it.
Well, they do. They say that, right? That God's Nintendo, and that is a super cool concept. But all right. So how do we get here? We start out, as Julia mentioned, Sarah is up for the murder of her stepfather. I was
played by the incomparable George Buckflower.
So who is that?
He is a character actor that shows up in a lot in movies of this time period. Usually, he plays homeless guys a lot. He played a homeless guy in They Live. But like he always kind of played these rough, around the edges guys, but he was just so believable at it. And like, even here, as goofy as that scene, like, because he's supposed to be drunk and he's drinking from a beer can that's literally just marked beer,
right?
And
it's generic beer.
As goofy as that is, like, there's this one moment. This is why I say these movies do well by their casts, even if the material's very broad. There's this one moment where he raises his hand like he's gonna like slap her, and then he stops and kind of looks at his hand, and he has this moment of like, what have I become, on his face.
Sure.
And I'm like, that's something, I bet you that wasn't in the script, like that he made that expression. Like that was probably a choice, and it just grounds the movie with enough humanity going forward, because the next scene you have the Evil Dead 2 scene where the hand beats him to death with a hammer.
Right. You're more forgiving of this than I am. I thought that this scene was just like, I don't. There was a scene in the.
You can use my word, dumb.
Well, what it did make me think of. So yes, that's a good bit. The looking in the hand is a good bit. However, there's this fake musical comedy in the reboot of Gilmore Girls on Netflix. And one of the funniest things is that they do this big musical comedy that is basically a parody of musical comedies, and it opens with a domestic violence scene. And it's every bit as sort of over the top and garishly lit and stuff like that. And that is what it reminded me of. But maybe it's possible that I'm not being generous enough to it.
I think that is completely, like, even though, like, it's like I keep saying, even though I enjoy this movie, I perfectly would understand why somebody would take issue with parts of it or all of it. Like, for me,
I truly, believe me, I was not offended. It's not one of those things where nobody should ever laugh at domestic violence. It's not that. I
don't think that the domestic violence part of that is the funny part. I think the funny part is
I'm sorry.
when the hand picks up a hammer and, like, because that it turns, even though you're not in one of the horror movie universe parts, it does basically turn into Evil Dead 2 for 2 or 3 minutes.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, there's the hand there's directly a hand doing stuff in Evil Dead 2.
Yes,
but
for sure.
Say that you may not be in it for the Stooges influenced Raimi parts of that, because they definitely have that. But I do have to give props that anytime you can take an object, a prop like that, and give it character, like having a hand, the way it picks up the hammer, and you're like, oh no, it has a hammer. All of that stuff.
Yeah.
It takes skill. I've seen bigger budget movies who have actors that I like less, or because they're directed a certain way, I like less than that hand.
Sure.
Right?
I grant you. Yes.
Selling that and the way it's sold is done really well. However, if you aren't in it for that kind of slapstick, it's not going to be as fun. Not as fun of a movie.
So I don't really so much mind the slapstick. I love Gremlins, for instance. Yeah. Well, you know what? We'll look for more examples. But I was okay with the crazy hand. I thought that the weird, living in poverty and and the stepdad is going to whack you for being, I guess, promiscuous or something. I just
he thinks she's promiscuous,
right?
As with the first one, a lot is made of Sarah's virginity, which is, and I don't know, for some reason in this one that makes me so much more uncomfortable than it does in the first one. I don't know why.
Well, partly it has to be that this girl is 30 years old. I mean, there's like the it. Yeah, I don't know. But the thing is, the whole domestic drama feels so plug and play. It really feels to me like our guy Hickox is just going, I don't know, what do I do here? How about if the guy like is wearing a greasy shirt and like he's got some generic beer and like some sweat on his upper lip and that's a thing that people do in the movies. And so that's really what it feels like to me. So anyway, whatever. We will move on because I really want to get to the business of this thing. She's up for murder. They decide she's, I guess, out on bond because she's able to run around, during the middle of her trial. And,
she tells the truth is her problem. She says that a severed hand kills her.
But she's not waiting in jail. She's allowed to go outside and hang out with her boyfriend and try to clear her name, which is good. So I presume that she like put her house up or something as for bond or bail. I can't remember which. But regardless,
it's out on bail with the bond. They're both. It's tied up together.
All right, thank you.
You post bond to make bail.
Anyway.
Yeah.
She is allowed to run around and participate in the adventure where they're going to try and prove her innocence by bringing back proof of the supernatural world, basically. And the way they're going to do that is Patrick Macnee has left them a film and a gift of a compass to find the doors into God's video game. And I believe that the first adventure that they split up immediately. There's this really wild scene that reminded me somewhat of Evil Dead 3, where Army of Darkness, where they're falling through space and big monsters are attacking them, and they go into separate parts of the universe. And
the whole scene where they're falling, I have to say, speaking of weird imagery, like Zach Galligan falling into the old family movie, and he's like going towards his like mom, I guess, like and she's got her arms out, and it's like uncomfortably to her, no nice way to say this, crotch area, and then the next visual we get is a baby in the embryo. That is all very strange, and
super
yet
strange.
It doesn't seem to have any like the reverse birthing imagery doesn't seem to have any it doesn't seem to have any
of this means.
Why. Like
I'm totally ready to buy that these are images that are flying through his head because he is in a disorienting space. Regardless, no explanation that I've given. Again, I get the feeling that Hickox is just going, I don't know, what do I do here? I guess I can have a big flying monster and home movies, and it's fine. But I do want to talk about the first big parody that they landed, because remember, in a way, Drew, last week you said these films, in a sense, are kind of anthologies. They're kind of just an excuse for doing these miniature stories.
I-
Yeah.
Although I wonder if it has anything to do with the sequence, if it was an influence derived from the Flash Gordon, where they're brainwashing Hans Zarkov, and he's kind of regressing and going back. Like, it feels like that too, because that's told in like a home movie kind of way.
Huh.
I wonder
do not good, very good. I don't remember that at all. It's amazing.
Thinking on that. I don't know. I mean, again, you get influence from a variety of places, but I just wonder if that's kind of like, hey, I saw that was kind of cool. Wanted to do something, because I think a large part of this movie is, this is fun, this is cool, I want to play in that playground. Let's go make a movie where I get to do that.
Yes.
And that feels like very much the intent, right? Like, I like all this stuff. I want to do my own versions of this stuff. How fun would it be? Let's go shoot this. Is definitely the vibe I get.
Yeah, and what's funny is, and I want to save these thoughts for when we get to the haunting section. The way he handles the haunting tells me a lot about the choices that he's making in the rest of the movie, and which is neither good nor bad. It's just they're just choices. You go, wow. So he chooses to shoot the rest of the movie the way he does, even though he's able to do a really solid Robert Wise impression for like half an hour, and that's wild. Yeah, and the canted camera and all that. So all right. So the first major parody that we see is Monica Schnarry, Sarah, lands basically in Alien, or
No, it's
something close to it.
Frankenstein. It's Frankenstein first.
Oh, it was I apologize. Was Frankenstein first?
Yeah,
I'm so
Frankenstein is
sorry.
first, because that's how they get separated.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, I apologize. I'm so sorry. So yeah, well, why don't you? Who wants to tell us about the Frankenstein segment? Because I remember, but I've been talking too much anyway. I mean,
the Frank, bringing up Sarah again. First of all, the Frankenstein sequence is a good example of where to air my grievance about the way they chose to take this character, which in some ways has nothing to do with the actress. But so she's still getting lost in whatever, like, you have Zach Galligan's character.
He almost never forgets who he is.
He never has those moments where he forgets who he is. But Sarah's
even though he totally gets sucked into the stories, which is what he said would cause you to forget who you are. He'll get sucked in and be really invested, but then he'll still somehow remember. So I think he just is immune.
Yeah. But it bothers me that they're still doing this with this character after everything she went through in the first movie. Like, there's like even though it's a different actress, there still should be some sort of like continuity there, to where like she's beyond this. But like in every sequence she goes to, she gets lost in the horror movie sequence they're in, and it doesn't actually amount to anything. Like, it really affects the plot in no way, at least in the first one. The Marquis Assad stuff, like, it had bearing on something, like it had some kind of weight. Like this it has nothing. Just so it's just an excuse for this girl to do a German accent for a little bit.
And it's a different plot. Like in the first one, if you forget who you are, you're more likely to get killed and remain. And in this one, that's not the problem. The problem is you're supposed to beat the game. I guess if you forget who you are, you might not beat the game, but it almost doesn't matter, because you usually land in the role of one of the good guys. So you want to win the game either way. It's totally different. You're totally right. It's a different concept.
Being said, I do like this Frankenstein sequence a lot. Like, I feel like it's the one thing that was missing. Even though you see Frankenstein's monster in the big monster rampage at the end of the first movie, you don't get a full Frankenstein sequence, and I feel like it's one of the things that feels like it's missing from the first movie. And I think this one, it's kind of weird, because it's like in between being Hammer Frankenstein and in between being Universal Frankenstein. Like, it's not quite like a full parody of either of them.
The Baron is a bad dude. It is the
he's much more in the mold of like the Peter Cushing Frankenstein.
Right. By the way, it's once again bassist Martin Kemp of Spandau Ballet returns to the Castle of Horror in his role as Baron Frankenstein. So,
by the way, as an aside, when you're talking about it being the game and getting lost, etc., I now really want to double feature this with the Dungeon Master.
I haven't seen the Dungeon Master.
Oh, man. Put that in my endorsement then, amongst other things. Is not a great movie.
Mm-hmm.
What it does, it's truly an artifact of its time.
Huh.
It also takes a person through various kind of genre-y things. But now that I think about it, now that you've put it that way, I definitely want to do that.
Wow. All right. Well, good tip. Yes. So yeah, Martin Kemp is back. It was really, really great to see him. I love the creature makeup.
I like the guy playing the Igor character. Like he seems like he's having a really good time. Like he's very over the top. Actually,
Yes.
everybody is pretty good in this sequence. Like I think the Burgermaster, I like the sort of Roaring Twenties aesthetic they went with.
Yeah,
for some reason. Yeah, like it's a cool little bit. Like I think again I almost wish you could kind of edit it into the first movie because it seems more.
I agree. Yeah,
at home at the first movie because like it's out of that sort of Universal Monsters lunchbox set.
I mean, you would have had to make changes from how it is here to fit it in.
Oh, sure.
It would have flowed really well from the vampire sequence into this, or vice versa.
Yeah.
I put it together would have been really good. Yeah, I love how gleefully insane that guy plays it. It's so good. He's hamming it up in all the best ways.
The makeup on the monster is also terrific. Like he's got this sort of like skull looking face with like long hair, and it feels classic. It feels almost like a Bernie Wrightson Frankenstein. You know, like I don't know. I dig this sequence. I'm going to save the thoughts on the alien sequence, but I wish that they had more like this and less like that. And I will get into my rationale when we get to that part. But
I like it, but the broadness of the sci-fi part feels kind of very disparate from how this feels.
Yes.
And I don't think it's done. It's not that it's not done well. It's just they feel so vastly different, and they're kind of going on together, like at the same time frame. You're cutting back and forth, and yeah, I think I'm with you, Drew. I like them okay, but I agree that I think the more classic stuff works better.
Yeah, Alien and Aliens look. I like both of those movies a lot, but I feel like they're too contemporary, and these movies are better when they're doing stuff that was a little bit more old school. And
also, the Aliens isn't really about good versus evil. I mean, Alien is just you're faced off against what amounts to a really dangerous, smart animal that is just going to do its thing. You know?
It's sort of like saying if like Jurassic Park is good versus evil. Like a T-Rex isn't evil if it eats you; it's just an animal.
Right. Exactly. There are bad guys there are evil characters. Burke is an evil character, but yeah. But actually, if we can go to the alien section, what I found really fascinating about the alien section is it shows you how darn hard it is to make a claustrophobic film about people running from an alien monster, because there's money involved. There's the cost of the sets. There's all this stuff because Sarah winds up as Ripley basically in an alien knockoff. So she's either and by the time they're doing this, there's been not only Alien, but there's been a whole bunch of like cheesy Roger Corman produced or Italian. A million ripoffs using the small corridors of either studios or various industrial
factories,
complexes. Yeah, all kinds of groovy stuff where there's like lots of metal stairs and stuff like that. And this makes you aware of how hard it is to frame all that stuff, because it's so hard to figure out who are you looking, where are they standing in relation to one another.
I guess I wasn't really troubled by that. I felt like It was a fun knockoff, as knockoffs go. And this is one of those times when I said, okay, that's a brilliant effect. It's disgusting, but it's brilliant.
Which
Because
one?
when she goes, and by the way, that was kind of an airplane callback, when she goes, thank God neither of us had the soup. And he's like, the soup? And then he immediately like
Right.
births an alien. Oh my God. I was like, that's so gross, but really good. Like, that was a really good effect. And I thought their alien was silly, but fun, but good. I mean, that was a good kind of silly, where I was like, that's a funny alien costume. I didn't bother me. I mean, I just thought, this is what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be just kind of a, hey, this is a nod to a movie that we all recognize, but we're not going to, say the names or whatever. But
I really wasn't bothered by it. It just made me aware of how difficult it is
to do it right.
to do it such that, and a lot of it has to do with budget as well. I don't mean just not showing the costume much, because they showed a lot, but you think of like Ridley Scott, and even though those guys are usually just one or two or three characters together in a bunch of hallways, you never seem to lose track of where you are relative to anything else. And that's a skill. I mean, I don't know how to do it, right? I'm not a cinematographer or a director, but it's just really interesting to go. The difference between this and Alien is that I don't know where I am, in these scenes.
If you want to see that done really well, and they talk about it, some of the commentary on it is Outland. With Sean Connery.
Goodness, what a great movie! Oh yeah,
great set design and place.
Yeah.
Each area, but it's hard to get that, and I don't. Our director here isn't trying to reach that. I mean, it shouldn't really compare it, because
a really good point. Yeah,
the intent is a fun movie that is an homage, and then some parodying the things that it's fun to parody.
Yeah,
like they're ridiculous tropes. By now, they're tropes in a way.
Yeah,
and we've
talking about
the fact that there's been a million of these movies of various, success. Some have been more successful than others. Sorry to interrupt, Drew, but
it's okay.
That's where he's kind of going with this. Is here's my brand of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Well, talking about like the tropiness of it, I think that's one of the reasons why I kind of object to there being like an alien pastiche at all, because I feel like even though there was like a lot of alien inspired movies in the 80s and 90s, like there's Predator, there was Species a couple of years after this, admittedly, but it started this whole kind of like subgenre. But again, it just feels like it's a different animal from the sort of like classic horror, that the rest of these things. It's kind of like what I was saying about the Marquis de Sade stuff, actually, is it feels like it's from a different tradition.
Yeah.
And like this, it's not Dracula, it's not Frankenstein. Like The Haunting feels like it's part of that tradition.
Mm-hmm.
Like this does not. And so it kind of sticks out to me. And
I do really like the facehugger aliens design, even though it's kind of more gritty and grimy just by the nature of our budget and how they make the other alien. I like that it has the eyes that overlay over the actor's eyes. That's a weird
that was super bizarre
concept, but it actually, if you're not gonna have the original design, that's kind of neat. Like, it's a different take.
Sure.
I thought choices in how to make an alien that we all go, oh yeah, that's the alien, but it's not was really interesting how they decided to do texture. But I thought that it looks so much grosser at first, and then when it kind of coalesces on her face, it's actually kind of a neat design that I wasn't expecting. I actually thought that was pretty cool. They had some really cool creature design and effects work, just like in the first one. That's all on display. And again, if you're gonna do this, that's where you're spending your budget, right?
So what's funny is, like I said, there's the weirdness of just generally, I guess if he's not interested in it, he's not interested in figuring out how to properly frame these scenes so that you don't lose your orientation while you're in these hallways. He doesn't have a lot to play with anyway. I mean, doing an alien movie would be super expensive, right? And he's got to make 7 movies here. But
look at the way the models look too. Like the Alien universe has a very specific design aesthetic it's carried through even into like the sequels, even into like the lesser sequels.
yes,
And this, like, they have a pretty generic spaceship model that they use, and
sure,
it's
it
just
looks a
not-
lot
it's
like
just
Space
not-
1999 with some
Yeah.
extra stuff on it, and a quote unquote old shuttle called Schwarzkopf, named after General Schwarzkopf, who was on everybody's lips at the time. And then, okay, so interestingly, after that, and if I'm skipping anything, I apologize, but I want to get to it. The haunting. So what's super wild about the haunting sequence is that here Hickox demonstrates that if he wants to, and maybe this is where he's spending the most time, he can do all the stuff that Robert Wise can do. He can learn all the lessons. He can frame things right. He can tilt the cameras, and it's a really, really nice parody of The Haunting that is like several levels more sophisticated than any of the other parodies that he does. I just found that fascinating.
This is the haunting sequence is the best, like hands down, the best sequence in this movie. Like,
up until you get to Bruce Campbell, the Bruce Campbell part. And then
So
it's
did you think that was too gross or too?
too gross and too dumb. I mean, again, he's being like, eaten by a bird or whatever it was,
a crow or whatever it is.
yeah, and he's not screaming or anything. So it just suddenly we're like, oh, okay, so this is just a dream. This part just feels now like a dream, because in a dream,
but it's a It is a parody. Like,
that's
it's
my
not
point.
meant
Is the
to be
rest of it didn't feel like a parody in that story. The rest of it kind of felt creepy, and then it gets to that point, and you're like, oh, okay, yeah, we're making fun of it. That's right.
I mean, you're not gonna hire Bruce Campbell and not have him get abused. That's
I guess that's true.
But he doesn't scream. He's not. He's just kind of like, oh, it's
so
cool.
he does
don't worry.
later when they do the business with the salt and the business with the vinegar and the.
No, he didn't even
all
scream
that.
then. He's just kind of like, oh, it's okay. Don't worry. Anyway,
I think that part's hilarious. I'm sorry.
I didn't like it. I didn't like that part because I had really gotten in. I liked the rest of it. I thought that was neat. So anyway, it's just not. It loses me at that point.
To each their own. I'm not going to try and change your mind, but I laugh my ass off every time I watch that scene.
Well, again, I think, I don't want to belabor it too much, but I do think that there's X amount of people who are going to be into, admittedly, the stuff that Raimi does, where he's definitely channeling what he loved about physical comedy, a la the Three Stooges. Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And a lot of people, you're kind of either in for it, like Drew and I, where you're like, that's funny, look, the salt, and the way each one of those is so broadly played out. Like, you telegraph it, and then you hit for the gag, right?
Well, and Zach Galligan is really good at playing. It's almost a shame that they didn't do more movies with each other, because he's a good foil. Like, he seems sincerely like he feels just bad for Bruce Campbell.
Right.
And I was like, man, these two are a good duo. I wish that they had been in more together.
But the way that plays out, you would think that Raimi had a hand in it, in the way it's directed. It's done really well. It fits in with that because of that all plays out. But again, if you're not in for that, the way that humor plays into the film, you're just not going to dig on it. It's a certain slapstick way of doing things, which I'm with Drew. Like, that's funny to me. Oh, look, and of course, when they undo the rope, he's going to fall forward.
Right.
I will admit,
but I think that's hilarious.
To your point, though, Julia, his wound, as far as it being a parody of The Haunting, his wound, as grotesque as it is not something that would have occurred in The Haunting. So I can understand why you'd say that takes you out a bit.
Right. Yeah. To use an expression that Jason hates, but it very much fits to me.
Part of the beauty of The Haunting is how much they do with so little that you see. It's one of the scariest movies with almost no gags,
right?
Other than just how sound design plays out and how you where you place the camera.
I
And then-
don't legitimately think this one is that interested. Like the first one is a little bit interested. It's still a horror film.
Right.
Like I don't really feel like, even though this one is gory, I don't really think that this one is that interested in being like a true horror film. I don't think it. I think it is way more of a comedy. Like it is. Like I almost watched this sequence, and I guess this may be why I'm not having the problem that Julia has with it. Like I almost watched the sequence of The Haunting, and I feel like I'm watching like a really good SNL skit.
Yeah, I
Haunted
agree.
house
It
movie.
has that flavor of just being a sketch. Yeah, interesting. I was thinking about Hickox, and I haven't seen a lot of movies by him, but I definitely saw Hellraiser 3, right? And I see that he made Sundown, The Vampire in Retreat. Has anybody seen that film, Sundown?
Oh yeah,
So is Sundown played straight, or is it?
Sundown's got a lot of comedy in it. It doesn't have quite as much comedy as it's funny.
Hellraiser 3 has like zero comedy, if I recall.
Hellraiser 3 has some stuff that I would say is comedic.
Pure comedy. I really don't enjoy. Hellraiser 3 does not work for me at all coming off of Hellraiser 2, and I never watched that film. I think I've maybe seen it twice, and I never like revisiting that film.
Sundown.
I can't guarantee that I've actually seen it. I think I must have, because I see it had Terry Farrell in it. So
talking about CD head, that was it.
It's Hellraiser 3 isn't comedic the way this is, but like I would also say Sundown isn't comedic the way this is. It's
what I'm asking, I guess, is the tone that he adopts in this film, is this unique for him? Does he choose, those are the ones where I did the real broad comedy?
All of his movies have a degree of comedy to them.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
I think humor is important, but it sounds like these are sort of their own.
Well, I would say these two, if you were talking about like his filmography, if you were to ask a bunch of horror fans, like Anthony Hickox movies, like which ones do you like? I think these two would be the ones that got brought up quite a bit as movies that people kind of like. And Hellraiser 3 is definitely a divisive movie, probably leaning more towards negative.
Why? I noticed
it's got dumb Cenobites in it.
Okay.
Again, for me, it is tone. I think you should watch it, Jason, at some point, but to see if it works.
I know Tony hates it. I don't hate it quite as much. I wouldn't mind actually doing an episode on it.
I want to see World War I Pinhead. That looks great. That sounds like a great concept.
It's got some stuff in it that I like. It's definitely not as bad as like some of the straight to video Hellraisers, but anyway, that's like we're turning this into a mini Hellraiser retrospective.
Anyway, the next sequence after. Well, first of all, did we say what we want to say about the hunting sequence? Julia mentioned Marina Sirtis shows up. They make a reference to the fact that
funny in this, like doing the Theo
lesbian Teddy, right?
Yeah,
and yes, good
with
stuff.
her big '60s bouffant hairdo.
Oh yeah, fantastic outfit. No, this is good stuff.
One of the things I do like about this sequence, which is, I will say this, one of the things I do like about the sequence is a completely alien visual choice from The Haunting, is that the ghosts are in color and everybody else is in black and white.
Well, there's it's almost also an homage to The Changeling as well.
A little of Shining, because remember the splashing blood and
well, that's straight. We're just going to do The Shining, but the feel of having to, there's there's this child endangerment that's also, malicious.
Yeah.
That was, that gave me the Changeling vibes, which was really cool.
Fantastic. I thought that was beautiful. Definitely, I kind of feel like no matter what, you should watch that sequence of this film. But it feels like the bulk of the movie, probably not, but because it has the best bad guy, you sort of feel like the next sequence is the one that is the most sort of important to the story, which is the story of Scarabus, the master in the medieval, like Arthurian story that they wind up.
Because all of a sudden he goes, well, now I'm going to make this fantasy
right.
movie. I've watched a lot of these like off-brand, Ator the
Hell
Fighting
yeah. That's what the 80s were about, baby, is a million sword and sorcery movies. Yes.
I have watched both on Mystery Science Theater and just watching, like, I forgot how many times I probably watched Hawk the Slayer just randomly.
Yeah.
All of that stuff, Ator, Beastmaster, all of that. You have it goes from horror to, it's kind of neat to see another parody, but this one, it doesn't even sometimes feel as much of a parody as it is just, hey, I want to make a fantasy part.
Yeah.
Here's the part where I get to
kind of wonder if this part started out as a Roger Corman Poe parody, because there's all the Edgar Allan Poe references.
That's true.
That makes total sense. And I kind of picked up on that, but you've just solidified it.
It seems a lot like Mask of the Red Death, doesn't it? With
Right.
the young lovers who have, everything. Yeah. Wow,
Right.
that's interesting.
It visually doesn't have that.
This time period.
It definitely does look much more like the sort of movies that Tony's talking about, that like 80s low budget fantasy movie. But like, it would have been cool to see them do a Vincent Price Poe movie. I think that could have been kind of a cool thing. This sequence does have my second favorite thing about this movie, which is the bad guy sidekick George, who is like having more fun than anybody else in this movie.
So tell me about, I want to talk about Alexander Goodenough, and I want to talk about George. George is played by, how do you say Michael DeBar? I apologize. It's DESBARES. How would you say that?
Yeah, DeBar.
DeBar. Okay. So he's playing an extremely foppish, lipstick-wearing male named George, who seems to be sexually predating on anybody nearby. And so that
probably praying would be the verb.
Praying. All right. Very good. He's into everyone. That's his thing. And
he's also kind of a sadist.
Yes.
Yeah,
sure.
Decided to make a fantasy Frankenfurter for all intents and purposes.
Yeah, that's true.
Oh yeah. Very, very drinking deep of the Rocky Horror. Well, but like, he's got such a good like, Scarabus is played more like Scarabus is not funny, really.
Right.
He's played kind of as a straight bad guy.
Yeah, he could be Basil Rathbone. He totally, absolutely.
Yeah, but George has he knows exactly what kind of movie he's in.
Oh yeah,
he's taking the piss out of everything. Like, there's this one part where Scarabus is like, kill them, and he says totally, which is anachronistic.
Yes,
but
yeah. And stuff like that was bothering me until I found out that none of this was, like you said, it wasn't jumping around in time, but rather this is just an alternate reality where good and evil are fighting it out. So then I was like, oh, okay. So it doesn't matter. Because one of the stories, was it that story, Jason, where he goes, Romeo and Juliet, or was that something else?
Yes. It's this one.
And Jason's like, no, I think that's anachronistic. But then, yeah, exactly. That's, if we're talking about something that's just almost like a dream world, then it doesn't matter. But that doesn't matter. He is a funny character. I agree.
He's just so, again, he's playing it very broad, but I mean, in such a way, when you have kind of everything else in the movie has been brought up to this point, and then you have this villain whose delivery is kind of understated. Like, he's very
well. Alexander Goodenough was a decorated actor in the Soviet Union
and dancer
and dancer. He was obviously a very important dancer, but he was also an actor. And Julia, one thing we were discussing before you got on was that he actually died just a couple of years after this movie, which was a shock. He looks in fine health.
Yes, he does.
Yes, but unfortunately, he was a chronic alcoholic, and he died of complications from drinking.
Like you do, yep.
Like you do, which is just awful. I wouldn't wish that on.
Wow, only 45. Oof.
Yeah, I mean, truly, I would not wish that on my worst enemy. That's just awful. And, so that's a shame. But, defected to the United States. Interesting dude. This is a guy, Gene Siskel used to say that a test for whether he would recommend a movie is whether he would rather watch a movie about the people who act in the movie. And Alexander Goodenough is one of the few people who you totally would like. Yes, I would like to see just a movie where Alexander Goodenough sits in a chair and explains to us the remarkable life that
I'd rather see the movie where, like White Nights, where he doesn't sit in the chair, but rather shows us some awesome dance moves while he tells us about his.
Yes, that would be great. Yeah.
If they had made if Marvel had chosen to make a Thor movie during this time period, he would have made a terrific Thor.
For reals. Yep.
Yeah. No, he's amazing. Yeah. So, what else? This has a semi-confusing storyline. It's not that confusing, but involving Alexander Goodenough wants to take over the king, the body of the king, basically.
Well, no, he doesn't want to take over the body of the king. He wants to be able. He basically
wants to replace the king.
He basically figures out how to clone the king with his own, so he can go back and forth between his own form. Because at first we were like, wait, is he gonna like give up his? Jason didn't use this word, but I use the word, his hot young bod to
right.
to become this old king just because he's the king. No, he's not going to give it up. He's going to have the best of both worlds and go back and forth between young hot bod and old king guy. But he does not.
Although he's kind of pervy. You don't know what his fetishes are. He does want to marry his sister.
Oh yeah. No, I don't mean that. I just mean he doesn't. He wouldn't want to give up 30 years of like prime. Although poor guy actually turns out to have died pretty soon after this. But assuming you don't die at 45, you don't want to give up 30 years of prime living to just become an old guy all of a sudden. So no, but you're right. Absolutely, he is gross in that he wants to get with his sister.
Which Sarah is. I guess I should say Sarah is within all of these has taken over the role of his sister.
Right.
He is trying to get married to the king, so
but also himself.
And there's also some Satan stuff involving werecats, and I don't. Oh my God. Forgive me, but I don't quite remember.
That's all him performing an experiment because, like, he was trying to see if he could turn the girl into the cat. He would be able to turn himself into the king.
Oh, thank you.
Is that what that was?
I can't believe. Wow.
Oh, you're so clever.
Wow.
I have my moments.
That's amazing.
I also talk about we've decided that the soundtrack for this could make fantasy, or we could just go full on parody and go with a Lady Hawk type soundtrack.
Right.
Thank you. Like, what was the deal? I thought it was like all like wall to wall Enigma, basically, and I was like, how are we doing this?
Faux Enigma.
Faux Enigma. Yeah, Julia called it Faux Enigma. There's the Faux Enigma soundtrack again.
Well, because that was popular, but then also again, it is all the synthy.
Yes.
Because a lot of synths became cheaper, so a lot of low budget sword and sorcery would have synths. And Lady Hawk wasn't low budget because you had known
Rutger Hauer and
well, I mean, the soundtrack was you hired people to do it, but it's so anachronistic and weird that almost everybody goes, "Oh, the soundtrack." But I just thought that bringing that back along with the weird phone.
Thank you for mentioning that, because I totally thought about that. How, because in a 70s film, it would have been like just needle drops of old classical stuff. Whatever would be pompous enough to kind of go with an action scene you would use. But yes, all of a sudden you've got this this synth score that's I don't know. I found that to be delightful and totally familiar and ridiculous. Yes, I loved that. Thank you for by the way linking it back to Lady Hawk, because that kind of explains where the heck this super synth sword and sorcery kind of score came from, and it makes me want to go back and watch a lot of those movies and see if I hear it a lot.
Hey, Tubi has a lot of that stuff. There's a couple other places that I think. Where was I watching? Actually, I was late at night. I have a lot of insomnia, so that's where I catch a lot of things. And so I forgot which channel has on the Roku has Hawk the Slayer, but that was a recent awesome. You can have, Palance choose the scenery in that movie, and it's great because of it. But yeah, that I just thought when they started, because it kind of goes in two different directions. There's a super synthy part, and then there is the part that's again was in vogue, and hey, this feels vaguely a fantasy. Let's do this Enigma kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It's such a
And for
weird...
the listener who like was born in the late 90s and has no memory of any of this stuff, Enigma was this band that did like 90s style techno music, but with chants, like they would have people do sort of, I guess sometimes completely fake Gregorian chants, and you would put it to a dance beat. And for some reason that was like super popular for a while.
Because it's awesome.
It is awesome. We could go spin Enigma tonight. I got zero problem with it. But it is kind of funny that it just suddenly became popular and then it went away. Yeah, good stuff. It's, by the way, Enigma reinvented themselves as, I think they're just still called Chant, and now they sort of lean into the parody, so they're doing things like covers of AC/DC and stuff like that. So they got a lot funnier.
What's weird
Anyway.
is they also tried to sell that on MTV since it was the Gregorian chant thing was so popular.
Yeah.
The Brothers Grunt, which was just a weird 1994 animation, like the first episode just leaned into that Gregorian chant popularity for some reason. But that's 2 years later than this, which is kind of funny.
Boy, if you wanna put your finger on a strange mini fad that just like burst and then disappeared, that is definitely one. Is the world of super popular Gregorian chant dance. Anyway, wow.
I imagine there's maybe someone out there who just discovers it. Someone in like high school.
Yes.
And that's their
thing.
That's their
You're going,
thing.
hey man, you got to hear this Enigma, man.
I don't even know there was this Gregorian chants thing, and people are like, you're so weird,
right?
like a new Lydia Dietz who is into this bubble, this tiny time period of like 2 years, 1 year, 2 years.
Yeah,
this on MTV and throughout, and then kind of faded away.
Poof.
But that would be, that seems like some indie director somewhere should. That seems like a character quirk an indie director would do, just because that's such a weird off. Like, no one would do that, and so that would make it interesting, or at least humorous.
Yeah, it was the CB radio of the mid '90s. Basically, it just it took over and then faded. But to come back to Waxwork II, they.
Long way around.
At the end of this sequence, they actually start really manically jumping from segment to segment, and Alexander Goodenough chases them, and the cool thing is he
turns into other characters. I love that. That was awesome. That was awesome. When he jumps in and suddenly he's in like this what do you call it, the cops, the Keystone Cops or whatever kind of like outfit or whatever.
He's in the Bobby outfit in Dr. Jekyll. And then like there's a period where they're in
but not just the outfit, like he's a different person. He's not the same actor anymore.
Oh, I guess I'd forgotten that. But
I don't
they're
think,
in the mall.
No, it's all Alexander Goodenough.
It is? I thought he was a different actor too.
No, they just have him and Zach Galligan swapping out different costumes.
Right. Awesome.
Like they do.
They have a full-on Tom Savini style section that lasts like very short time, but a lot of like groovy Dawn of the Dead gore in a mall, in like a mall just like Dawn of the Dead. I mean, and
that's how they get their their severed zombie hand.
That's right. That's right. Yes. Yeah.
I like this part again because it's more of what I wish that they had a smidge more money for the Godzilla sequence, because I feel like that Godzilla puppet looks worse than even the cheesiest Godzilla movie. Like,
of course it was.
It's truly,
that was terrible.
Hey, we have a budget, but it works. I think it works because we are in parody land.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
That one is funny. That one is funny. It is funny.
Like they make him as Nosferatu as possible. But we're okay with it not being straight up because we're firmly in parody land.
Yeah. He looks
The
funnier
Mr.
than he
Hyde
does creepy.
the
Yeah.
Mr. Hyde makeup is pretty spot on to
It is, isn't it?
the 1930s Mr. Hyde. Like the Godzilla, I don't know why. The Godzilla one is just a bit I'll grant you, yeah, it's funny. It's a bit too much for me. Like perhaps I'm being a little too reverent to Godzilla. I don't know.
No?
I mean, it's done really well. The fact, I mean, what it goes back to is they had X budget. They decided to go super broad and go with kind of a puppet rather than a suit, because then you'd have to build a whole suit, and why you've already built an alien suit, right?
Right.
It seems ridiculous in that way. And they play it, I think, correctly for having a puppet. I mean, the kind of bad dubbing part where like, oh, Godzilla, that's the part where I'm like, that's the part you're gonna. And
it's a little. It's not quite PC, is it?
That was a really common trope of the time period. Is
they even do it again. They even do it again, like a few years later in the Lost World, which is a big budget movie,
right?
And they kind of lampoon Godzilla this way. So
right. I mean, but this wasn't the first to do that, but the dubbing is the funny part of it. I at the time though, I probably would have thought, that's pretty funny. That's haha.
The reason you don't laugh is probably, Tony, because it's I think it's a good idea. Look, I don't write comedy. I don't make comedy, so what do I know? But it seems to me that if the gag that you're thinking of is a gag that everybody's already been doing for like 20 years, nobody's going to laugh at that gag because it's too familiar. You know, if you're going to do a gag about dubbing, you're going to have to find a new gag about dubbing. I don't know what it would be, but it's not going to make you laugh when you do it, and it's not going to make the audience laugh because they've seen it.
I do still laugh at I have some crank call from when that was popular, like all the crank call gags.
Yeah.
Some guy calls, it's terrible, and I know it's terrible.
Asking for Daikatana?
He calls as if he's like from a kung fu movie.
You know, I think the thing here for me is that
funny to me still. So I don't know.
I think the thing is here with me with the Godzilla sequence is like all the other stuff throughout both of these movies. You can tell that there is a lot of affection and there's like attention to detail. Like I go back to the mummy sequence in the first one, that they go into Swan Lake when they go into that scene, and there's like literal lifts of bits from like the Hammer mummy movie. So like you can tell there's like real affection to like what they're spoofing, whereas the Godzilla one, it's like what you guys are talking about. It's like they're cheap jokes,
right? And you shouldn't do those because it makes people feel like they wish that they want to move on to the next gag, and that's
they do quickly. I mean,
it feels
that's true. I think it could have served better had they just gone generic, even more generic giant monster, and just played through that. Because the idea of, hey, I like kaiju movies, let's do a Godzilla riff in horror, because you kind of can't skip it in a way if you're gonna start ramping it up the way that this movie does.
Yeah,
skipping it feels wrong.
Sure,
but you also would have worked had it been Beast from 20,000 Fathoms. Again, it's kind of wrong, like I always say, to say,
I don't know what gags you would do about Godzilla if you've got a 45-second segment. Right. I don't know what the gags would be. I mean, like, look, I don't know what choices you would make. So I'm
probably thinking on this too hard.
That's true. So this is the segment, by the way.
Sorry, to take you through at least one giant monster. It could have been any. They chose this one. That's fine.
Well, honestly,
you have to.
I kind of wish that they had done like there's a throwaway line earlier in the movie about the Loch Ness monster eating. Right. That's true. Dr. Frankenstein's notebook. I kind of wish they would have done a Loch Ness monster sequence.
Oh, that could have been interesting. Yeah,
it is interesting how there's actually a lot of sequences that are just a gag in dialogue that he says. So apparently, between the moment when he left Frankenstein and when he finally reaches Sarah again, he actually had a number of adventures we didn't even see. And then at the end of this movie, he sends her back through the portal back to prove her innocence with the evidence, thank God, he remains in the, I don't even know what we're calling this thing, the Nexus. He remains in the sort of multi-world where he's going to fight evil.
He's going to be doing Quantum Leap with monsters, basically.
Yes, sure. Which sounds great. That sounds really good. I'm down with following his continuing adventures in this.
I just took it as he was stuck in medieval land.
No, he was going to be a time
He's
warrior.
still got a sextant. He can still move through the doors. So he'll just keep fighting. He stays because he has to stay. Because as I understand it, he decides his destiny is to be a fighter for good in the never-ending battle.
For more movies, why not, right?
The ending of the movie, though, where she gets the time door, doesn't quite sync up with because they do the Back to the Future thing.
Yes, they do.
But that doesn't quite sync up with the mythology as they have described, because that seems like they're doing traditional, what we think of as movie
you're right.
travel, but it doesn't quite work with everything else they've established. Like I said, I don't feel like the rules in this movie, like in the first movie, I feel like the rules are not, they're, for a movie that was written in 3 days, the rules feel pretty well charted out. Like you understand, like this is what can happen, this is what can't happen. This movie plays a lot more fast and loose with that.
Well, again, the fact that it comes from England, I guess that's why even though you're correct, it felt like, hey, I'm just going to stay in medieval land because that's where I'm at right now. And then the letter comes from England. That's what I guess that's what I picked up in my brain is that thing. But yeah,
I never thought about it until just this moment. You're absolutely right, because he's not in the past. He is in another universe. So maybe, I don't know, maybe he found a place, a window that he could throw the sextant through with a note for FedEx. I don't know. That's wow, what a good question. You're exactly right. Also, that they could do a Back to the Future gag. That is all it is, and it's not a funny haha gag. It's just a lip. It's just right, like in Back to the Future. But that's okay. I
can't be. I disagree that it's just throwing it through the thing, because he also has the painting on the wall of himself. So clearly he has been in the past of this.
Okay, so
it's just
so let's be honest. This movie doesn't want to bother you with the fact that there's a difference between the past and fantasy, which is weird. I can't explain that. But
I mean, the real meat of the matter is because it's fun,
right?
I mean, this movie works very much off of rule of cool.
Yes,
like which kind of makes me feel like we're also having the Dark Man conversation that you two weren't a part of, but me and Tony were.
Right.
Because there's a lot of choices in Dark Man that I had to defend, that they were just in, that David objected to, but I had to defend. I was like, well, they're in it because it's cool.
Right.
And, I think, look, sometimes that's okay. Like if a filmmaker, if that's what you want to do, like when it comes to, people making their art, and, people can roll. I'm sure there's going to be a ton of people rolling their eyes out in internet land that I'm talking about Waxwork II as art. But when someone is trying to put like their idea out in the world, their art idea in the world, I think you do have to kind of follow, for better or worse, you have to follow your vision through. And, sometimes that means the narrative choices you make might not make sense to everybody else. But
again, I'm going to go back to, I feel like when it's done in a genuine manner, in the way that this is done, doesn't feel cynical. If you're gonna do rule of cool, and it's because you just feel passionate about it, like let's have fun, and this is you with your action figures playing when you're younger.
Mm-hmm.
Overall, I'm kind of down with that. I'm sure there's plenty of movies where that doesn't work for me, but I'm way more inclined to give it a pass. And I'll be honest, you can usually tell when somebody is genuinely enjoying themselves creating something and doing that, as opposed to, they won't care, just put this in, and this is what they like. They being whoever this audience is.
Good point.
Because that happens a fair amount. it works for me just because I get the impression everybody's trying to have fun and do this off kilter thing, and I don't know, I enjoy that. Some of it works better than other times, and I wouldn't say this is by any stretch a perfect movie, but give me an imperfect movie that's full of fun and heart over a possibly, for lack of a better term, better executed as far as maybe visuals or some other part that feels it has contempt for its audience, or feels like we're just going to make this because this is what is popular right now. And I never get that impression from these movies, and there's something to that.
That's excellent. I couldn't have said it better myself. We should get our final thoughts on Waxwork II. And Tony, I know that you just talked, but you're first. Is there anything that you would add to that?
No, I mean, I think that's kind of my.
That was beautiful too. So there you go.
I enjoy this movie. It is not a perfect movie. I think the first one, because of the way it sets up the rules and does its horror and it's less broad, I think that one's probably going to appeal to more people as well. But again, as far as a person who likes, I mean, we've talked about a million ridiculous things that Lava Shark should make, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Any of those are as ridiculous or more than anything that's in this movie.
Yeah.
And we still go, man, I would love to make that, or that would be cool.
Yes.
So, Jason and I have a pitch for, Zombie Submarine.
Yeah.
So I can't fault anybody for just kind of getting it out there. I mean, they made all these cool parodies, and there's really great bits, regardless of how broad you think things are. There's a lot of gems in here that are well worth your time if you want to have fun. And lately I like lighthearted. I enjoy heavy stuff, but as of late, there are many movies that I would kind of put on hold in order to watch something more like Waxwork II. So this was fun to me.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Julia, what are your thoughts?
I don't really have much more to say than what I said before. I've highlighted the things that I thought were neat. Like I say, I enjoyed having Did you talk about the Nosferatu piece? Did I zone out for that?
We just made mention of it. Just
I think I zoned out for that. Yes.
Yeah.
There was a couple different things where I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. I like that piece. But I just, I think any film where they spend the most money on the gore effects is not going to be my cup of tea. But and then the story, like I say, the framing device of the hopping around to the different stories is great. The other part where it's the court case with the hand, not so much. I don't love that, but whatever. I mean, it's not going to win any Oscars, I don't think, unless it's going to win some for the effect, I guess. But
Right.
it's fine. It's like I say, it's whatever. If you like, if it's the kind of thing you like, then maybe you should check it out.
Very good. All right. Thank you. Drew, what about you?
I mean, I like this movie. I do think it's goofy. I do think it's a step down. Again, the original has like a purity to it. It's got the purity of concept that I think just works better. But this, as Tony said, is a lot of fun, and it's solid escapism. And I think that that has been very necessary over like lately. This is definitely like Tony. This has definitely been more the kind of thing that I've been in the mood to watch. Like the other big horror movie thing that I watched recently was Demon Knight, and I feel like it's kind of the same species as this, where it may not have a lot of brains, but gosh, it's a lot of fun to watch. And that's okay. To Julia's point, no, this was never going to win any Oscars, but not everything needs to be that kind of movie. I think there's something to be said for something that you just put on and you can have a good time with, and that's what this is for me. So on that level, I am glad that we talked about these movies, because I think that they are movies that I have a lot of affection for, even though I don't think either of them are perfect. But they make for good conversation fodder.
Wonderful. I could add almost nothing to that, other than I was going to say is Demon Knight the one that has Dennis Miller, or is it the one?
No, you're thinking of Bordello of Blood. Demon Knight
Okay.
has Billy Zane in it.
Okay. The funny thing is, Bordello of Blood. Now that's a movie that's played for laughs. I enjoyed the comedy in that one more. This Waxwork 2, not as good as Waxwork 1 for me, but the haunting sequence is really good. So you could pop it on and then just start paying attention when it moves into black and white. But it was very interesting to finally think about these, and it gives us a good reference for. It gives me a good reference if I ever want to play with something where you're moving through lots and lots of portals like this. So yes, we should go around and get our endorsements to find out what you guys, if anything, you don't have to share, but what you might have been watching or listening to while you're trying to distract yourself from the fall of Western civilization. So we started with Monsieur Tony. Tony, do you have any endorsements for us this week?
So I'm sure I had some things at the beginning, but as we walk through this, two things stuck out. An animated feature from 2019 called I Lost My Body, which deals with an animated hand trying to get back to its owner. It's beautiful. It's totally not the animated hand from this movie. There's a lot of poignancy to it. It's beautifully animated. Animating hands is not easy.
Right.
And the fact they chose to take something that's kind of hard and turn it into the movie that it is, that's on Netflix. It's called I Lost My Body. It's really beautiful, a beautiful film. But the hand sequence reminded me like, hey, maybe I should segue into that. Also, I'm going to go with this is definitely your mileage may vary. I'm always worried I'm going to say, hey, go watch this. And people are going to go, why the hell? I'm going to go with a double feature of Waxwork 2 and The Dungeon Master, which also has an appearance by Wasp.
All right.
Also has, if I'm not mistaken, Richard Mall is the main bad guy. That's fun. Yeah.
Also the main bad guy in The Destruction of Jared Sin, right?
Oh, yeah. Right.
Yes.
Jason and I were talking. I was kind of sad because now that I can watch 3D movies in my home, Metal Storm is on 3D Blu-ray, but Space Hunter, which also has Molly Ringwald, is not, which I think is an oversight because I think as both of those are not great movies, but Space Hunter I think is a better movie overall. Both of them are fun and ridiculous. And have fun sci-fi bits with some really cool production design, actually. Definitely, hey, we're going to just chuck crap at you in 3D.
Yeah.
So that's really cool. But yeah, I'm going to go with the Dungeon Master, which looks like there was a Blu-ray of Dungeon Master and the Eliminators, which would give you an awesome 80s double feature, but that looks really expensive. So unfortunately, I don't know where the Dungeon Master is streaming because it looks like Amazon locked it behind some region something. But you can get it for like $8 on a four movie set, which I don't know how good that is. But I saw the Dungeon Master in the theater in '84, and again, something about the anthology part, and also it has really little to do with any kind of dungeon mastering as Dungeons and Dragons goes, but it is of a time and would make a fun double feature with this movie. Again, don't yell at me if you go.
That sounds delightful. That sounds really cool.
Why would you donate? Please, it's fine if you tell me that, but please don't be angry if you go, I want my time back.
Perfect.
You should watch it for the Wasp part anyway, because we should do some more heavy metal horror movies. Even though by and large, a lot of them are not so great, but they are fun and crazy. So yeah.
Julia, do you have any endorsements for us?
I can't really think of anything because I've been so glued to the news for the last few days that I've forgotten. And I did hit quite a few last week, so I feel like I kind of backed away from new stuff. There wasn't a lot of new stuff this week anyway. I don't know. I can't think of anything. If you think of anything that you remember that I liked, let me know.
Okay. No problem. No problem. Drew, what about you? Do you have anything to endorse us?
Yes. First off, if you're looking for a good, cheap laugh, that also will give you a small bit of education. I got a big old kick out of watching the history of swearing, or history of swear words. I might be saying this wrong, on Netflix, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's a documentary series about swear words, and it's only 5 episodes, and they're all for, they start with, fuck and work their way down. And it's hosted by the greatest living movie star, Nicolas Cage. So if you either that I guess your a lot of your enjoyment of this might depend on how much you like Nicolas Cage or not, but I found it funny, and my wife found it funny and informative. The other thing that I have been getting into since I got HBO Max, and I think this is something that a lot of people could take something, because Julia brought up the news, and I think we're all like feeling a bit aghast and maybe wishing we could be our better selves. And strangely, like, I have found it in going back and looking at an earlier iteration of a character that I have been kind of dismissive of in recent years. I have been revisiting Batman the Animated Series.
Oh.
And I had forgotten how sophisticated that show was, and how well written. And I knew it, obviously, but it's just such a beautifully done show with wonderful versions of that. But everybody already knows that, of course. But the thing that I'm thinking of is the versions of the characters on the show are not what we have now, like decades removed from this. In particular, Batman on the show is a hero I think almost anybody could get behind. And I say hero with a capital H. He's not an anti-hero the way he's often written now. Like, he's an aspirational figure. He is very even though he's a brooding figure, he's a very caring man. And I think that that's something that has somehow been lost. But also, I think that it's a good message for now, is that strength can also include empathy. And Batman has extreme empathy even for his enemies. Like, I just got done watching an episode today where they have rehabilitated the ventriloquist, and Bruce Wayne gives him a job in his company, and puts him up in a apartment building. And when his old gang members start like harassing him to try and get him to rejoin their gang, Bruce Wayne, as Batman, takes those, chases those guys off. And at the end of it all, even after he's reverted back to being Scarface, Batman forgives him. Like, he gives him his job back, he gives him his apartment back, because like there's that empathy there. And I think nowadays we think of strength, we don't necessarily think of empathy anymore, and gentleness even, and the ability to have compassion even for people who might not necessarily show you the same compassion. And I just think there's something there. And
yeah, man, sorry to interrupt, but I think you hit upon it. I think there's also a lot more Dark Knight detective work in the series, which I really enjoy. And I think the way that he's portrayed, like you're saying, there's a kind of cynical view now, and it hasn't helped that the last few movies is like, oh, well, Bruce Wayne's just this millionaire who dresses up so he can beat up poor people. That isn't, and I can't say that that's wrong in some of the ways he's been portrayed.
But to Drew's point, it doesn't have to be. It doesn't.
No, he's like, and I think in a world, and I taking this in with the events of the last week, like in a world where like, here's Donald Trump, here is your idea of what a strong, powerful person should be like. Well, that's a guy that to him strength is a bludgeon. And then you have this version of Batman who, like, yes, he's a skilled combatant, he's tough, and he's frightening to his enemies at times, but it's tempered with this ability to actually be quite caring. And the show the duality of strength like that, I think there's something important to that. Like, I think that it's important that we see that in our fictional heroes, because that's, especially with like young people, like they're going to take away like, well, I want to be like Batman. They're thinking, I want to be like Batman. Well, don't just show that Batman is just tough. You show that he also has a heart, and that's also a more complex character too. I don't know. I was really taken that, like, in contrast to what I was seeing on the news, which is this celebration of a culture of apathy, and the sort of end result of the fuck your feelings culture.
Yeah.
And and then going and contrasting it with this version of Batman that has such a depth of, again, he is a brooding figure. He's still very much Batman, but he's got a lot of heart. And like, that's really what I respond to. It's funny, like, I feel like people look at like the Halloween Man character and they think like, okay, I like these like dyed-in-wool anti-hero characters, and that's not really true. Like, what I respond to is more like this. Like, I want to see that complexity of character, and I like to see characters that have sensitivity to them. Sorry, this turned into a bit of a rant, but I'm distilling my feelings from what I've seen on the news and how I escaped it with Batman.
I think that's wonderful, though, and I really appreciate it.
It's also beautifully animated.
Oh, it's gorgeous.
Absolutely.
So
it's the best. It's the best. It's still, to me, it's the best animated, weekly cartoon series that I've ever seen. Like, it's just beautiful.
If you look up the way they remastered it for the set, also just holy moly! I need to get that set.
What else is funny, unrelating to what I was just saying about Batman, but kind of still kind of related, is like the way we think about like the Joker now. Like, there's this whole idea now that like, the Joker would never actually try to kill Batman, and I think that's like an idea that's kind of come about through 20 odd years of distilling it through Frank Miller and Alan Moore, because like the Joker on the animated series, like, he enjoys battling Batman, he gets a kick out of it, but if like he got eaten by a shark or something, I don't think he would be too upset about it.
Well, he would find it hilarious, for one thing.
Sure.
And then B, he's always so dejected when his plans fail, because he really wants Batman to be out of his hair so he can just do whatever things float his boat. So I'm totally with you.
I think that's a better version. Absolutely. Like, I was really quite taken to that. I also, anytime I rewatch Batman the Animated Series, I fall back in love with Mr. Freeze. Like just such an amazing reinvention of that character.
Oh, yeah.
No, it was truly lovely.
There was a lot of speculation about who's going to play, what character after the Tim Burton the first movie, and they kept saying like, oh, we're going to sign Patrick Stewart to play Mr. Freeze, and I still would like to sidestep into the dimension where that happened, because I think it would have been great.
Yeah.
But I am totally with you. Those episodes are really fantastic. I like the Man-Bat episode as well.
I mean, you can't really go wrong with that. So long story short, my endorsement this week, Batman the Animated Series on HBO Max.
Yes. Well, thank you. That's fantastic. I'm glad that you shared that, because I also have nothing, but that was more than enough. That was fantastic. Dungeon Master and Batman Animated Series should keep you busy enough for the week. And we'll figure out between now and next week what exactly it is that we're going to watch next, because we don't yet know.
We're still debating. I'm still going to go back to people ask us all the time, hey, what are you doing next? And it's not nearly as planned as you might want it to be. And I apologize in some ways, but also, that's kind of the nature of.
Sometimes it is, but
I did. It's not quite a horror movie, but I did just have a crazy thought. I think it would be funny to revisit Jason and Julia's first date. I think we should do RoboCop.
Oh God. Well, we can think about it. That's an interesting thought. All right, we'll pick this up online. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us for Waxwork II. We can't wait to engage on the Facebook page and find out what people have to say, and be excellent to one another and have empathy like Batman. I will see all y'all next week. Bye.
Night.
Good night.
Night.